and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bethany. I am a future author, spiritual life coach, and mindset mentor to Christian women who have been wronged by the church, shamed for things they've done outside of the church, and essentially being condemned for being themselves. During our unconventional Christian chats, we will chat about things that normal Christians don't necessarily like to talk about. I want to shine light on the false beliefs taught to women in the church, and on this channel, that is exactly what we will do. I'll also be taking you through the journey of creating my first self-published book, you guessed it, all about the false beliefs taught to women in the church, labeling us as, well, I will label us as the unconventional Christian. Now, last week we had our first unconventional Christian chat, which we chatted about toxic positivity inside of the church. Hold please, before we get into anything and everything, number one, my AC is still on, okay? My face is red because I'm hot. Yes, I could be wearing a short sleeve shirt, whatever. I don't have clothes right now because they're all dirty, whatevs. So the thing is, I'm going to keep the AC on. The last video, I could kind of hear it in the back, but hopefully we can get through it together as a lovely family, and so I don't die of heat stroke or whatever. Cool? Great. So, here we are, and last week I even said that maybe I'll be doing my makeup while we talk about these unconventional Christian chats and this other subject that I'm about to get into. But girlfriend, I don't think I'll be doing my makeup on here because number one, I forgot that I don't really know how. I only know how to do my face, and I don't even know how to do that great. So I was thinking about, while I was getting ready, I was like, oh, should I do my face while I talk about the subject we'll get into? And I was like, you know what? No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. I will spare you the pain because I couldn't even get eyeshadow on my eyes that well. So we probably won't be doing that, but we're going to be drinking our favorite drinks while we talk about things that normal Christians don't like to talk about. Another subject that I want to get into, instead of having a series of unconventional Christian chats like I am doing and I want to do, I'm going to add in, so every other week, I want to do a segment on of church horror stories. Not horror stories. Church horror stories. So here's the deal. I understand. I know that the things that you have dealt with and I have dealt with inside the church are very traumatic, could be, how you processed it, could be very traumatic event, because when I look back and when I process it, they're very, very traumatic events. However, how I believe a lot of people process through and how I process through is by humor, right? And I even put humor in my YouTube, not thumbnail, but like, you know, like the cover, whatever. Because humor is everything. So here is the deal. Every other week, we're going to come out with, I'm going to come out with a church horror story. So I have done some content creation today over what I'll be talking about the weeks to come. And this week is going to be the first church horror story from me. Later on, I would love for you to be able to, if you have any church horror stories, to allow me to shine light on your story, to shine light on what you had to process through, and or if you do have questions about whatever happened to you, if you have questions, we can also chat about them here. But I think that'll be a really, really cool segment, not just for me to spread the word about the things that I've kept inside over the things that happened to me, and just the stories that I have in the church that I grew up in, and what, some things happen inside of there, but to bring light to other people's stories. So, if you have a church horror story, I would love, love, love if you would email me. I'll put it in the description box below, and I'll label it for church horror stories. I would absolutely adore it. If you want to keep it anonymous, you can, if anonymous for here, I just won't say your name, but I'll probably print them out or read them on my computer and bring light to your story as well. And we can process it together. We can laugh about it together. We can do whatever it is together to, again, bring light to the horror stories of the church. And I think this is going to be a really fun segment to do. Week 1. The first church horror story. Are you ready? Grab your fave drink. You're gonna want something to sip on here. Okay. Church horror story number 1. Oh dear God. Oh, years ago. years ago. I was in youth. Duh. I was in youth. When I graduated when I graduated high school, I was then a youth sponsor. Why I didn't go to the women's class in church was because I had always known since middle school, which we can get into this in another video. I'd always known since middle school that I was made to lead women in some capacity, but I didn't know what that was. So every chance that I'd get, I would lead women, because I feel like that was such a huge calling, and still is, obviously, huge calling and push and drive in my life. So instead of going to the women's ministry on Wednesday nights, I stayed in youth to help and lead the teenagers there. So I was around 18, so I'd be paired up with the girls there, for church camp, for prayer, for whatever. And these girls are 12 to 17, I guess, because I was 18 when I graduated high school. Yeah, sure. So instead of going to the women's ministry, which that's what happened when you graduate high school, you'd also graduate youth. So I decided to stay there, help these girls out, because we were really close, whatever. So time comes for my bestest friend in the whole entire world, her bachelorette party. She is getting married. She's getting married, and we're going to another town about an hour and a half away, and we're going to a club. Now, mind you, during this time, I was this time in my life, I was very iffy over the decisions that I was going to make. Like, oh no, should I do this because I don't want this person to think of this of me, whatever. So I decided to go with my best friend who's getting married to her bachelorette party, so I could be her designated driver. Okay, I didn't drink. Designated driver. I didn't drink. So we did this. We had fun. Blah, blah, blah. And this moment in my life, I was single. So no big deal. Obviously, she gets T-rashed. And I drive her back to the hotel. I think I had a drumline gig that next day, so I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay the night, so I had to go somewhere else. Anyway, not a big deal, right? Totally fine. Nothing inappropriate happened. It was perfect. Fantastic. A few days later, or a few weeks later, I can't remember specifically, the boyfriend that I used to have, who also graduated high school, who also stayed in as a sponsorship, texted me. We were dating at this time, but he texted me and he said, hey, people in the church are talking about you being the designated driver. And I said, okay, that's fine. Like, no big deal. And nothing happened. I have nothing to hide. And I didn't think that I had to defend myself at all over this case. And granted, at this time as well, I was doing the youth sponsorship and I was on the praise team, because music has always been and forever will be a very, very big part of who I am and a part of my life. So I was on the praise team as well. So he texted me, said people in the church are talking, and me being me, I said, I don't care. I didn't do anything wrong, right? And because of the people in the church are talking, which granted, like, that is what happens at the church that I was raised in. And I went to the youth pastor. I texted him and I was like, hey, can we meet? You know, I want to smooth things over just in case you had heard something different. Because in my town and in that church, going from a designated driver story to, oh my God, she was drunk and slept with somebody and now is pregnant. It can go, you know what I mean? Like, it can go super far, super quick, and not the right story. It's like the stupid game telephone. That's exactly how it is. Like, it's never going to be the same. And so he said, sure, let's go ahead and meet. And then I went down to the church. I lived 30 seconds away, so I walked down there and we had a meeting. And I was like, hey man, just so you know, no big deal. I don't know what you have heard. And he was very, very serious during this meeting. But my intention going into this meeting was putting a fire out before it even started, essentially. So I told him, hey, just letting you know, my ex, I said his name, he knows him. I said, he texted me and said that people in the church were talking, which I think is silly because, like, don't do that, right? Just don't. And they're probably telling people something that never happened. So I sat down and I told him exactly what happened. I was a designated driver. Period. That's what happened. And he said, okay, I feel like this is a very serious conversation that I need to have with the senior pastor. And I said, oh, why is it serious? I'm coming to you right now and explaining something that people are gossiping about in the church about me, and in my opinion, I was the example more than the problem. And he said, I'm gonna take a moment and go talk to the senior pastor, and come back and we'll have another meeting. And I said, okay. Super confused as to why we're having two meetings about this silly subject that's not even meeting worthy. And I come back, I sit down with the youth pastor. Senior pastor wasn't there. However, there was a woman there. Since I'm a woman and I was sitting with the youth pastor who was a male, there had to be a woman there, though there wasn't a woman there before. That doesn't make sense. So he says to me that I have to step down from being on the praise team, which, man, you could take a lot of things from me, but every time, this wasn't the first time, every time that they would tell me that I needed to step down because my heart wasn't right with God, really, really hurt my heart a lot. Because, segue here a little bit, I am a music student. Well, I was a music student. I graduated college with a music degree. I graduated with a music education. I had my senior recital left to do before I had my music degree on paper. And then I realized I don't want to teach 7th graders how to play the freaking trombone. So then I switched to kinesiology. So my degrees are in business kinesiology and music. So I kind of know what I'm talking about, right? And I know how to play a lot of instruments. So I helped a lot of the praise team out with arrangements, with whatever. Okay. And I'm a very versatile, like I was saying, very versatile player. So if somebody couldn't make it on a Sunday morning or Wednesday or whatever, I could easily fill in. No big deal. And I had told the praise team leader of Sunday mornings that, and I'm like, hey, letting you know, you never have to go without if so-and-so's not there to play a drum set, or he's not there to play piano, or he's not there to play bass. Let me know. I'll come to the church early and fill that spot. No big deal. Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. I tell you, this happened after I had to step down for that final time because of the designated driver thing. I had told the praise team leader this for Sunday mornings. I told him, hey, I can fill in, kind of thing. And he said, oh, thank you, I appreciate it, blah, blah, blah. Not one time did I ever receive an invitation to help them out, though I could. I don't know how many times they went without a vocalist, a drum set player, a pianist, and even a bassist. I do not know how many times. And I'm sitting with my dad in church Sunday morning, and he's asking, why aren't you playing? I said, I don't know. They never told me. They never asked me. And that was all after I had to step down because of being my best friend's designated driver. So, going back to the meeting, he said I needed to step down because I wasn't being a good example to the women in the church, the youth in the church, and I also had to step down of being a youth sponsor. And I had to go to all the women's meetings instead, which I never resonated with any of those women in there, to be honest. We weren't same. I don't know. Like, it's not like I didn't like them, but we just never resonated. I only resonated with maybe 2 people in that whole women's whatever. But it just wasn't my jam. Wasn't my thing. Being a youth sponsor was, because I could help these women who looked up to me, who were vulnerable and who were authentic and who wanted help. Maybe that was the reason. I started going to the women's meetings. I didn't like it, so that's about the timeline where I stopped going to that church. Backsliding from God, all because I was my best friend's designated driver for her bachelorette party, and I was punished for it. Now, those were the punishments for that. And the meeting I had with these 2 individuals, it was very concerning, because this was a part of my life where I started to greatly question a lot of things in the church. For example, while being the youth sponsor, at this time when I got into trouble for doing this, we were a few weeks out of going to church camp. In this church camp was the thing. Like, you go to church camp, it was fun, right? And the church services, everybody gets filled with the Holy Spirit, and if you don't speak in tongues there, it's weird. That's the outlook. Pentecostal church, Assemblies of God church. Okay. We were supposed to be going to church camp a few weeks after, this whole thing. So I wasn't allowed to go to church camp either, which extremely broke my heart because, again, I was supposed to be over these girls who were going. Before camp, there's usually more prayer meetings than normal. So you're going to prayer meetings and you're going to Wednesday night church. So you might be going to a prayer meeting before, praying about what you wanted from God during church camp before the Wednesday night service. There was a woman who was head over the prayer time before Wednesday night church, and she was also in the praise team. And I remember her saying this, our church camp, their church camp, it's huge. So many churches, so many kids, right? So crowded lines everywhere. And she was saying that, she said, during church service, remember to not stay in the pews. Always go to the front of the church, like during praise and worship and altar time. Because the closer you are to the front, the closer you'll be to God. And I sat there and I'm like, no, that ain't right. Because I remember so many times you would look down upon people who wouldn't be raising their hands or would walk to the front during altar time or during prayer time or during anything related to God time. If they decided to stay in their pew and stay in their seat, it's like they don't want more of God. That's sad. I really wish they'd want more of God. And it was such a shameful pointing of fingers and very much shaming people for not going up front. And now that I'm saying it out loud, I feel like we were made to believe that because going up front is a physical declaration of I am wanting more of God. This is what I want. Instead of really digging in deep in who you are and asking yourself, well, what do I want? You know what I'm saying? So it was more of an outward than an inward. And when she said that, it really bothered me because my thought process at that time was, if she is saying this, and obviously it's not biblical, if she is saying this so flippant and so easy and it's not accurate, what else could the leaders of this, this was all happening like 5 seconds of sitting there and when I heard it, what else could the leaders of this church be saying so easy and so flippant? That is not correct. Because I was raised believing every Sunday morning, because Sunday mornings, usually the youth would sit up in the front, and during praise and worship, everybody would go out of the pew, because that means you want more of God. I think, now that I think about it and say it out loud, I'm like, oh my God, like, what a corrupt mindset to have during praise and worship. Like, the closer you are to the stage or the closer you are to whatever, the more you feel God. I don't understand that. Anyway, when I was sitting there thinking, like, what other things could be said that are incorrect? Because, again, we were raised to believe if you are at the altar, you are the closest to God you could. If you didn't come out of your pew during a prayer time or, again, altar time, then it says more of you in that moment in your relationship with God than anything else. And how awful is that? Like, how awful. And when you are back there and you decide not to go out of your pew, there were moments where I was like, because it got to a point where I was like, I am not leaving this pew unless God himself removes me. Because I do not want to be moved by what the pastor is saying. I want to be moved by what God is saying to me and over my life. So there was a moment in my life when I started to really think about, oh my God, like, am I believing the things that these people are saying? Because when they say these things, they're not true. Like, they're not true. And I started asking all the questions, and I started to question everything. And again, when you start to question things in the church, that is a red flag for them as to, oh, your faith is being shaken, or you're backsliding from God, or, oh, you can't do this because you're no longer an example to these people. Oh, which is scary. That's scary, because if you are in a group of people, if you are in a congregation of people, no matter what it is, politics, religion, school, I don't know, and you are not allowed to question what you are believing, or you are made to be wrong if you are questioning things, that should be a red flag for you. That should be the biggest red freaking flag for you to be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be here. If I'm going to be looked at as condemned, or my feelings, the feelings I'm having and the questions that I'm having equals that I don't have a relationship with God, or my relationship with God is hindered, that is something that I don't want to say that you need to, like, you don't need to do, like, whatever, you don't need to do anything, but to really ask yourself, is this something, like, is this a place where I really want to be? Because that's scary. After I was banished from being a youth sponsor and had to step down from the praise team, I was also lectured about the evilness of alcohol. Okay. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying that this was the time in my life when I began to question everything. Literally questioning everything. I was sitting on the other side of the pastor's desk because we were still talking about things, and he was explaining to me the just downright evilness of alcohol. Mind you, I didn't drink. Again, I was the designated driver. So, first off, this isn't making any sense. So remember, the two people are there, the man and the woman, okay? And he was saying that his dad was an alcoholic, and the woman said the same thing. Her dad was an alcoholic. And they said there is no good thing that comes from alcohol. And I thought that was rather strange. Mind you, that there are people in this church who do drink, who are on a leadership position, but they hide it. I'll just say it. They hide it because of the stigma of drinking alcohol in this church, which is super sad, because if you're going to drink alcohol, freaking drink alcohol. I don't know when it was that I began to be comfortable going into liquor stores, but it was years. It was years, because my thought was, well, what if they see me at church? What if they know my dad? Which they probably did. But I wonder if they know, whatever. So, in this meeting, I was so taken aback by the claims that he was saying, because since he had a terrible experience with alcohol, sure, that sucks that your dad was an alcoholic. However, there are plenty of people who can have beer, alcohol, liquor, whatever, and be okay. And be okay. I refer to it as, there's even a scripture in the Bible that talks about gluttony, right? So I refer to everything as in moderation. Obviously, let's not do drugs in moderation. Let's just not do that at all. But you know what I mean. So if we're going to drink something, I mean, if you're going to get drunk, let's make good choices. But at the same time, you shouldn't be freaking shamed for drinking a glass of wine while you're eating, while drinking beer while you're watching TV, with whatever. Like, whatever. But the amount of condemnation that these two individuals were putting on me, again, I didn't drink, was insane. Because nothing that they said, I think it bothered me so much because nothing that they said was biblical. The only thing that they were saying was through their own life experiences. And they were putting their life experiences on me, saying, you should never drink alcohol because alcohol is from the devil and alcohol is evil. Literally, verbatim, wish I could have it in recording, but I never thought I'd hear somebody say alcohol is from the devil. It's like a water boy thing. Super strange. And I was like, I disagree. And I was so freaking proud of myself because I stood up for myself. And I said, no, I disagree. I do not think it is evil. I think it is what you do with it. What are the actions that you're going to take? Are you doing it in moderation, or are you freaking binge drinking? Because if we think about it, it only makes us uncomfortable for the, church folk. Uncomfortable because alcohol makes you drunk. Obvi. So binge drinking versus binge eating, it's looked at as worse because maybe the consequences of your actions could be worse, but at the same time, it's binging. No matter what, if it's a disordered eating habit or if it's a drinking habit, they're still freaking habits that are solutions to a deeper problem. And that needs to be dealt with and worked through and not shamed for the outward choice of the solution to the deeper problem. So this meeting really, really bothered me because of the lack of fact, probably not facts, but the lack of love and the thought of condemning more than understanding. There had to be a consequence for my actions. There had to be a meeting about where Bethany was going in her relationship with God. And that really, really jolted me and really bothered me. So I think I was living with my dad. Yeah, I was living with my dad at the time, and he was a deacon in the church. He was irate at the thought of me having to step down, all of those things. So right then, he completely had my back. He went to the pastors and was saying, if you think that she needs to step down, then you're telling me that I'm not doing what I need to be doing as a father. And for that man to say something like that, it's like, oh my God, that's scary. And then a few months went by and I was making other choices. I was making other decisions. And he told me, which there is no pointing fingers at my father. He only knows and does the best that he can with the information that he has. And he told me, which dug a knife into my heart was, well, maybe those pastors were onto something. Maybe they kept you away from those girls for a good reason. And oh my God, did that ever hurt my heart hearing my dad say that, because I didn't feel heard in that moment. And in that moment, I was like, this isn't the type of God that I want to serve. And I don't think that he'd punish me for being my best friend's designated driver. And I don't exaggerate this story at all. It was such a simple act, but that's what it was too. And in that meeting, I said over and over and over, I didn't drink. Why am I being punished if I didn't drink? And he said what I should have done was dropped her off, go to the hotel or something, and or park, whatever, and just picked her back up after the end of the night. And I said, so essentially I'm being punished for walking in to a building. And he said this situation would have been so much different if I didn't walk into that club. I'm like, okay, listen. So you're telling me I'm getting in trouble and I have to step down from the praise team again, and I have to go to a Wednesday night service that I don't want to attend because I stepped into the four walls of a building that they label as a club. That's why. And he said it would be completely different if I just didn't go in there and didn't entertain anything. I'm like, there was no entertainment of anything. Like, there was no dangling the carrot in front of my face like a freaking rabbit and like alcohol, like, ooh, it's super close. No, I was a designated driver. I'm not a freaking idiot, right? And so that was the decline that I had in the church that I grew up in. And the girls in the church started like the teenagers, they were extremely upset. Not at me. There were so many girls who decided not to go to Wednesday night services anymore because of not because I wasn't there, but because of the decision that they had made, according to me. And there were even women of the church some women of the church, like the two that I was talking about, who thought it was, a lot of them left. There were a lot of the girls, so the two women, no, one for sure, it went from like a lot to one. One woman and her family, the two, and her family left the church. A few of the youth also left. Because that wasn't the first time they had made a decision like that over somebody's leadership position. And I stopped going a little bit after that because, again, it wasn't the first time that I had to step down from something. And we might get into that later. But it was a very, very hard, however, good thing to happen to me. Now that I'm saying it out loud, a good thing to happen to me because, number one, I can share these stories with you. Number two, because that allowed me to really question what I believed in and what I chose to believe in and what I wanted to believe in, what I wanted out of a church, because that was the church that I knew I was so dead centered on always going to that church. But there's a lot of misconception and a lot of contradiction in that church, of the people in that church. And I'm glad that it happened. When it did happen, I was extremely devastated because I had always felt supported by the leadership of that church, but in that moment in time, it was Oh, all right. So we're there. We're at that point. Okay, cool. No warning, no nothing. So I'm gonna go. All right. See you later. Anyway, that is the first story time of a church horror story. When I say a church horror story, I wanted to also give you this example so you're not like, so it gives you kind of a range, maybe is a good word to say, because you might have a story but you're like, oh, maybe she doesn't mean this type of story, or maybe she means this type of story. I mean any story that happened within your church, within people of the church, within the parents who went to the church, or just any type of story that you feel like you were wronged by the church, essentially. So we can really talk about it and we can bring light to that situation, because I feel like it needs to be talked about more, because we're taught to, hush hush, like, let's not talk about it, like, people in the church. Oh, I read something. No, I listened to something today, and it was from God is Gray on YouTube. I forgot her name, but go look God is Gray up on YouTube. I was watching some of her videos today, and she said that, or it was her or Fundy Fridays. One of the two. Go watch Fundy Fridays too. That's so much fun. So one of the two, I don't remember, was saying that we are made to believe that church equals good. That's what we have been programmed to believe in this nation, in your, I don't know, in your house, in, even the church that you grew up in, the church, whatever. Like, we are made to believe that whatever happens inside of the church, or whoever is in that church, equals good. So if something controversial or bad happens in the church, it's no, of course it didn't happen. Well, maybe they meant it some other way. Or, oh no, you're just being too sensitive, of course that didn't happen. When in all reality, that effing happened, and you have to freaking talk about it. I just spat everywhere, good God. You have to talk about it, because if you don't talk about it, then it's going to continue to happen. It's going to continue to be pushed under the freaking rug when it's not supposed to. Bad things happen in the church. Not saying in every church, not saying every bad thing happens in all churches. That's not what I'm saying. I am simply saying there are bad things that freaking happen in the church, but we are programmed to believe that, of course, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. We're fine. It's the house of God. Nothing bad can happen in the house of God, right? Wrong. Freaking wrong. Absolutely wrong. Here is today's episode. I'm so glad that you have found this channel. If you loved today's episode, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I would forever be appreciative of you. And don't forget to click the little bell so you'll be notified every single time that I upload a video, which will be every single Tuesday. Every single Tuesday. So I will put in the description below an email that you can use. Oh dear God. An email that you can use to send a church horror story to me so I can read it on here. Again, if you want it to be anonymous, just put anonymous in there, and I won't say your name, or I just won't say your name. I don't know. Just, if you don't want your name said on the interwebs, like, just put anonymous, and I won't say it. Anyway, I love you so much. Remember, you are the greatest of all time, and I love and appreciate you. I'll talk to you next week.